lazy, entitled, stupid, selfish. You've probably seen the videos, read the comments, or maybe even posted a few yourself. There is a very loud consensus on the internet right now that baby boomers sold out the nation's future. And honestly, you probably agree. But if you feel that anger, congratulations. You are doing exactly what a private equity billionaire paid for you to do. The generational war we are all fighting right now was carefully manufactured because your anger is the only thing standing between Wall Street and a massive target, Social Security. That small cut taken out of your paycheck every week goes into a giant government-run pool to send a monthly check to every retiree in America. Right now, the government manages all of that. But if that money were diverted to private hands on Wall Street, the management fees alone would generate a staggering $940 billion windfall over 75 years. There's just one massive problem for anyone trying to get their hands on that cash. 80% of Americans actively love Social Security. Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. It is the most popular program in the country. Because of that popularity, the usual corporate attack strategies are useless. If a special interest group tries to lobby against it, they fail. If a politician accepts campaign funding to attack the program, they get completely wiped out in the very next election. Imagine you are the strategist hired by Wall Street to solve this problem. Frontal political assaults are career suicide. How on earth do you turn the public against a safety net they cherish? You realize you can't fight them on the policy. You need to find a completely covert, psychological method to change how the public actually feels about the people receiving the money. To build that method, you'd look at what had been tried before. Back in 1961, the American Medical Association wanted to kill Medicare. They knew they couldn't attack a popular health program directly, so they launched a covert campaign called Operation Coffee Cup. Step 1 was hiring a charismatic Hollywood actor named Ronald Reagan. They brought him in to record a piece of audio warning the public about the dangers of socialized medicine. Step 2 was distribution. The AMA pressed his speech onto vinyl records and shipped copies directly to the wives of doctors all across America. Step 3 was execution. The wives hosted coffee parties to play the record and then passed out pens and envelopes. To maintain the illusion, the plan required these letters to appear as spontaneous notes from everyday neighbors, masking that the AMA was pulling the strings. Surprisingly, it actually worked. Letters quickly flooded Congress, and the initial bill was defeated. But the victory didn't last. By 1965, Lyndon Americans had Medicare coverage. Operation Coffee Cup proved that viral, grassroots deception was potent, but not strong enough to permanently stop the government from providing healthcare to retirees. Jump forward to the early 80s. That same Hollywood actor, Ronald Reagan, is now President of the United States. He tries his hand at ending Social Security, and he fails spectacularly. The Senate votes his attempt down 96-0. If a sitting president couldn't do it, who could? The answer came in 1983. Two strategists, Stuart Butler and Peter Germanis, analyzed past failures and published a new blueprint. They called it a Leninist strategy to privatize Social Security. This diagram shows their three-step roadmap. Step 1 is the foundation. Unify the financial sector. Rally the banks, the insurance companies, and all the institutions that stand to profit. Step 2 builds on that base. Find a specific target audience and slowly manipulate them into fighting on your behalf, turning them into a proxy army. And step 3 is the trigger at the top. Patiently prepare all this infrastructure and wait for a massive societal crisis to strike. When it hits, you have everything ready to go. What this paper proved was that arguing over policy was a waste of time. The only viable path to seizing Social Security was to convince future generations to actively hate the system and the people who benefit from it. To make that strategy work, they needed a scapegoat. They needed a specific group that possessed the wealth and security that younger generations felt locked out of. The mastermind who funded this strategy was Peter G. Peterson. He was the co-founder of the Blackstone Group, one of the biggest private equity firms on the planet. Over the next 4 decades, Peterson poured $458 million into the strategy, building a labyrinth of organizations specifically designed to target the youngest generations with a singular message: you are being robbed by the old. When the environment is flooded with that much capital, generational friction stops being an accident. Every headline or viral trend that mocks the boomers serves as a pre-packaged distraction, keeping us focused on our grandparents while the people who funded the narrative prepare for a payout. Now, remember step 3 of the playbook. wait for a crisis. The strategic crisis they have been patiently building toward to execute their final move is only 6 years away. This is the true cost of the generational war. It keeps millennials and Gen Z entirely distracted, fighting with their grandparents, while corporate forces work quietly in the background to strip away their future safety nets. It forces us to ask where our information comes from and who is quietly profiting from our cultural anger. Because as long as citizens stay fixated on hating the generations that came before them, private equity is perfectly positioned to execute the largest financial heist in American history. This timeline tracks the Social Security Trust Fund. In 2032, the money runs out and it falls right off a cliff. Right now, retirees collect $2,000 a month. When the fund hits zero, payouts drop 20% to $1,600, with proposals dragging it to $1,025. For people in their 20s or 30s, those massive future cuts are compounded by a median savings of just $40,000 today. Nearly 1 in 4 millennials have already raided those accounts to cover rent or emergencies. Drained savings today and broken promises tomorrow create a demographic of millions who are financially terrified. In 2025, a campaign led by Russ Green began circulating a specific phrase: total boomer luxury communism. This frames older generations as living in a Marxist paradise at the young's expense. The messaging is designed to anchor young people's financial panic to a clear target of generational anger. There is a sharp disconnect in this anger. Every current political proposal to cut Social Security exempts the checks of current retirees. Advocates for these cuts have testified before the Senate specifically to reassure seniors that their benefits remain safe. Focusing political frustration on the elderly while ensuring their income remains untouched suggests an objective beyond simply balancing the budget. Russ Green's strategy follows a blueprint from 1983. Over 40 years, corporate interests spent $458 million keeping this generational framing alive. Green's published plan lists 3 specific steps. Step 1, raise awareness of generational injustice. Step 2, align Wall Street, corporate America, and the media to amplify that message. Step 3, form a counter-lobbying group to break the power of the AARP, which currently protects Social Security with 38 million members. Green's own notes acknowledge the risk of his plan failing. He writes that if we don't cut Social Security, the only remaining option is tax hikes. Generational conflict creates a political environment that protects the wealthiest 6% from paying higher taxes. The campaign aims to erode public faith in the current system, easing the transition toward a privatized replacement. In a privatized model, your retirement funds are diverted into accounts managed by Wall Street. Private equity firms then siphon off a percentage of your savings as management fees. This transition represents a projected $940 billion payday for firms like Blackstone. Dismantling the public fund creates a massive transfer of guaranteed wealth into private management. Fixing Social Security is mathematically straightforward, provided we look at how the ultra-rich are currently taxed. Current law creates a ceiling for contributions. You stop paying Social Security taxes on income above $184,500. While standard workers are taxed on every dollar, the top 6% see their income go untouched. Eliminating this cap closes 2/3 of the funding shortfall. Removing the tax cap is supported by 68 to 80% of Americans across all age groups and income brackets. Interestingly, the same organization running the 1983 privatization playbook found 2-to-1 support for this exact tax fix in their survey. They left those results out of their published report. A popular, highly functional solution already exists. Acknowledging it would completely remove the primary justification for a private takeover of the fund. On a policy level, the generational war is non-existent. Millennials and boomers agree on everything from housing to the protection of retirement. Falling for the distraction allows private equity to move closer to their billion-dollar payday. So the next time you feel anger about your financial future, just ask who is actually profiting from that anger. Financial security for one generation is not a threat to the next. The real beneficiary of this conflict is the financial system, positioning itself to manage and charge for the rest of your working life. Social media feeds today are a constant stream of housing market data, cost of living comparisons, and reaction videos. The common thread is a deep frustration directed at baby boomers for their perceived lack of empathy and their control over the economy. While this resentment feels like an inevitable part of modern life, the specific concept of generational conflict was virtually absent from American media prior to 1983. That year, a Wall Street executive named Peterson gathered allies from Exxon and General Motors to begin a multi-decade effort to shift the national conversation. Their strategy relied on persuading young people that their future economic security was being threatened by the benefits provided to their own grandparents. They aimed to convince the youth to support dismantling programs like Social Security and Medicare by framing them as an unfair burden. To achieve this shift, Peterson and his corporate allies spent a total of $458 million over 30 years, funding a series of organizations designed to manufacture this specific brand of political hostility. The first attempt was a group called Americans for Generational Equity, or AGE. They established immediate political credibility by installing sitting U.S. Senator Dave Durenberger as their chairman. AGE promoted the specific message that the elderly were actively taking from the young. This effort generated over 1,000 references to generational conflict in major publications, successfully introducing the framing into the national press. The organization eventually collapsed when Senator Durenberger was investigated for using the group to fund his own re-election campaign. Although the group itself disappeared, the old versus young narrative they championed remained in the media landscape, providing Peterson with a template for future campaigns. In 1992, Peterson joined billionaire Ross Perot to launch Lead or Leave. This organization targeted Gen X by building a network of chapters across American college campuses. By 1993, the campaign scaled up with Third Millennium, a group backed directly by Wall Street firms like Merrill Lynch. They began rebranding Social Security as a generational scam. To provide a statistical basis for their claims, they hired political pollster Frank Luntz to survey young voters. Luntz's survey included unrelated questions about UFOs, alongside questions about the future of the economy. By combining these separate data points, the campaign claimed that young people believed in UFOs more than Social Security. This fabricated statistic was cited in hundreds of news stories and was eventually included in a speech by President Bill Clinton. The campaign moved into mainstream culture with a Call Your Grandma initiative and MTV ads. These ads featured young people telling their own grandmothers to oppose Medicare benefits to save the youth from future debt. As these Gen X organizations folded, the idea of seniors as greedy geezers became a standard trope in the social zeitgeist, shifting the blame for economic stagnation onto the elderly. In 2012, the focus shifted to millennials with the launch of The Can Kicks Back. This organization was led by the same circle of activists and advisors who had run Peterson's previous campaigns for decades. This group used a Trojan horse approach. They rarely mentioned Social Security in their initial pitch, focusing instead on the widely accepted goal of fixing the national debt. They leaned into digital trends, featuring 81-year-old Senator Alan Simpson in viral videos. Simpson told young viewers to stop Instagramming and start supporting cuts to retirement programs. In 2014, the group lost its tax-exempt status and was exposed for sharing office space with the very Peterson-funded groups it claimed to be independent from. These organizations functioned as disposable delivery systems. Despite their public collapses, their core message remained in circulation, ensuring the generational narrative outlived the groups themselves. For the billionaires funding these groups, organizational bankruptcy was secondary to a much larger goal: buying a feeling. The $458 million spent over 30 years was an investment in creating a permanent emotional reflex. This diagram shows the actual distribution of wealth in the economy, with a massive gap separating the elite at the top from the rest of the population at the bottom. Peterson's campaign worked to replace that vertical gap with this horizontal dividing line. By framing the conflict as young versus old, the campaign encourages working-class youth to view their grandparents as the primary obstacle to economic security. Peterson died in 2018, but the hostility he funded continues to appear organically on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. When we see a systemic crisis blamed entirely on a specific generation, we have to ask who benefits from that focus. The next time you feel that urge to blame a generation, ask yourself who is being left out of the conversation.